How many of us have felt the feeling of constriction, as if you can't breathe? So many of us have felt this, whether it's because of people, because of situations in our lives, because of what's happening in the world around us. And the Prophet ﷺ felt this way himself, probably in ways we never will. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hijr is making note of his feeling. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the last 3 verses of Surah Al-Hijr, وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ يَضِيقُ صَدْرُكَ بِمَا يَقُولُونَ. Here he's telling the Prophet ﷺ, we know your chest is constricted at what they say to you. And what's important to realize here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is acknowledging the Prophet's feeling. He's literally telling him, I know your chest is constricted. And he's telling him, like literally validating him. He's telling him, I know how you feel. And I think it's so important to really highlight this right now, because a lot of times when you're in pain, people can tell you, oh, you brush it off as if it didn't exist, right? But actually the first step to healing is to sit with your feelings and to realize what is happening, what is my feeling. And when Allah here is validating the Prophet ﷺ, can you imagine how the Prophet felt? Like Allah is telling him, he's describing his feeling, I know your chest is constricted. And that gives us permission to feel the way we feel. That's how we heal. So it's important that we pause there and see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acknowledged that feeling of the Prophet ﷺ. And after he let him feel his feeling and he gave him attention to the feeling and he actually called it out for what it was, that constriction, he now gives him a formula. The next verse is fa, so. Basically, because you're feeling this, do this. And the next few verses are commands. After the fa, so it's فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. So glorify your Lord, your caretaker, your nurturer, in praising him. And subhanAllah, right away you feel like your caretaker, your nurturer, it almost right away gives you like you have somebody on your side, when you're feeling that. And then hamd, praise. A lot of people tell you, when you're going through a hard time, grab a gratitude journal, write down your blessings. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ, don't forget to be thankful. And when you are thankful and when you count your blessings, you can't detach that from the one who gave them to you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So right away they go hand in hand. The sabbih, the glorifying Allah and thanking him, they go hand in hand. And an interesting thing about the word sabbih, it comes from which means glorify. It comes from the same root word as sabaha, to swim. And when you think of somebody whose chest is constricted, think of somebody who's literally drowning, right? And sabaha means to swim. So that's how you're keeping yourself afloat. So a part of keeping yourself afloat and stopping from drowning is to glorify Allah. It's giving you that sensation that you have someone there for you. That's what it's doing. And then it says, وَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ, and be of those who prostrate. The interesting thing here is that it's not a command to physically prostrate. He's not saying isjud. It's not prostrate. Be of those who prostrate. So it almost makes you feel like it's a state of mind. And here you think of mindfulness. There's so many people talking about mindfulness these days and what it means. And it's basically being able to step away from your feeling of constriction and realize, well, what is really happening? What is true? Why am I feeling this way? What can I do? And here, kun min as-sajidin, it's interesting that he said sujud. What is it about sujud? When you think of sujud, prostration, it's the most intimate moment you can feel with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's a hadith that says the closest time the servant is to Allah is in his sujud, is in the prostration. And that's where we're told to beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask him what you want, stay hours in sujud and just pour out your heart. So Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ, like, pour out your heart, I'm here for you, I got you. That's what I get from this verse, subhanAllah. And then the last and final piece, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ, and serve Allah until what is certain comes to you. And most tafsir books agree that here yaqeen means death. There's other opinions, but a lot of them agree that yaqeen is death. And if you think of death, it is inevitable. It is what is certain. Nobody can deny that they will die one day. So Allah is saying, serve until your very last breath. And that calls us to question, well, what am I serving? And those are all necessary questions. Like, and we're supposed to ask ourselves, what is our purpose? Is our servitude to our nafs, to our desires? Is our servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is it to what society wants? And this calls us to realize, are our values aligned with our purpose? And this calls us to question ourselves and kind of like do that self-reflection, internal reflection. And these are all very necessary steps to get out of that constriction, subhanAllah. So again, these verses are the last 3 verses in Surah Al-Hijr, chapter 15 in the Quran. And I love the fact that Allah Ta'ala started off this recipe, for how to release some of that constriction in us. He started it by validating the Prophet ﷺ's pain and acknowledging it. And I think that's what we all need to do for each other and for our loved ones, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.